I asked my favorite booktubers to help us all find great standalones. 2 months ago, I was in my living room finishing book 6 in Wheel of Time series, and I'm like, oh man, this is great, but will I have the strength to finish this behemoth of a series? And that's when I had the idea. I started writing emails and messages to my friends and favorite YouTubers, asking them to collaborate to find the best standalones, checking my messages like crazy every 5 minutes. In that moment, Leonie answered, what a cool idea, count me in. Bookborn saying, yes, that sounds great. Mike, Petrik, and I'm like, this is working. So here are 17 great standalones that I hope you will love. To make it extra fun for each of these recommendations, I will separate them in the pile of books that I've read and the ones that I haven't, and I will rank them in order of which are the ones that I love the most and the ones that I'm the most interested in reading. So hopefully you can do the same exercise and see which are the books that compel you the most. And we will start with the queen of fantasy booktube, Bookborn.
Hey guys, I'm Bookborn, and my recommendation for a fantasy standalone that you can read is actually a collection of short stories. I love doing short story collections, one, to give me a taste of an author's writing personality. It can often be a great way to get into a new author and their longer works if you already know they like their writing, and because it helps me out of a reading slump, because there's a sense of accomplishment when you get to finish so many little stories within a larger narrative. So my recommendation, of course, is The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. Ken Liu is one of my very favorite authors. He's the author of The Dandelion Dynasty, which is a longer series. So I think this is a great way to get into his work in a smaller setting. All of these stories are either magical realism, fantasy, or sci-fi, so there's a nice blend of kind of the SFF genres in one book. They are all beautifully written and extremely emotionally moving, and I think it's a great way to get introduced to one of my favorite authors, and it is a book I recommend over and over again. If you like it, I hope you'll tell me about it, and thanks for having me, Fun Fantasy Books.
Okay, this is a tough one. Out of the 8 books in this list that I've read, Paper Menagerie is one of them, and I love the idea, as Bookborn said, of being able to go through different stories. It certainly gives a certain amount of accomplishment. And in this case, there were some that really landed, but there were others that were not as phenomenal for me. And for that reason, I'm going to settle these in position number 6. And although Ken Liu is a master at blending genres of fantasy and sci-fi, if what you want is having a look at the sci-fi dystopian side, let's have a look at this next recommendation.
The standalone novel that I love the most, that has just got completely stuck in my mind and I just can't stop thinking about, is the dystopian book I Who Have Never Known Men by Jacqueline Hartman. This short, compelling read shares the life of a lady who has lived a life bereft of many human experiences. She grows up in a cage in a bunker with 39 older women, and they are only provided the barest essentials for life by a group of silent guards. One day, the opportunity does arise for these women to escape into a desolate post-apocalyptic world. This novel reminded me a lot of The Road by Cormac McCarthy in its plot, setting, and themes. Seeing humanity find a way even without society, finding a reason to go on when there doesn't seem to be one, and finding a light when things are incredibly bleak. This book asks questions like, what does it mean to be human and to live? Couldn't put this book down once I picked it up. I hope you check it out.
That sounds really good, isn't it? Fascinating and mysterious and very weird. So out of the 8 books that I have not read, I will position these at number 3. I am really keen on reading it. I think it's short and I will be able to tackle it, and it sounds so interesting. But if you like this idea of not knowing what happens but changing topic for something that is way more uplifting, I bet you're gonna love the next book, which is actually one of my favorite standalones of all time.
So since Issa said I could cheat and use a sci-fi book instead of a fantasy book, I'm going to go ahead and recommend Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, especially if you are an audiobook listener. This is one of the best audiobook experiences I have ever had. This is a fun, fast-paced story of a person trying to save humanity, and there's all kinds of fun science stuff that happens along the way. And there is a reason I'm saying it is specifically better on audio, but I don't want to say what it is because it is a massive spoiler, but it is well worth listening to this book. If I did have to quickly throw in a fantasy book recommendation, it would probably be Warbreaker. I think it's a great standalone for now that Sanderson has that then has the ability to let you go into the rest of his work. But for me, Project Hail Mary is one of the best standalones that I have ever read.
Project Hail Mary is such an amazing story, and for me it's one that I've read already twice. I've loved both times. Each time I am struck in something different, and one of the ideas that I love, it's not only the uplifting tone but also the twist of some different tropes and the journey on itself. I had the biggest FOMO because I read these on Spanish, and now I'm like, I want to listen to these in English to see what happens. But because it's so great, I will position Project Hail Mary at the top 1, and it's not going to be the last time that we hear about Project Hail Mary, because let's see what these two amazing ramblers have to say about these.
Thanks for having us on. One of my favorite sci-fi novels is a book called Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which is near-term sci-fi, so not in the distant future. It is set with a hopeful tone with some great character work. It has sucked me in for the what ifs. I felt like I was learning something on how science actually works. I can't recommend it enough. Some of my favorite characters. It pulled me on an emotional journey. I think it is a wonderful example of hopeful sci-fi, which I don't think we get enough of. If you haven't, check it out. It's also, I think, going to be a motion picture sometime soon.
With Ryan Gosling, of all people. Come on.
The best.
That's a must-see. Thank you much for having us on. This is Piranesi, standalone book, super short, by Susanna Clarke. It's masterful in a lot of ways. I can't promise you this is going to be your entertaining holy crap read, but I can promise you, if you are an atmospheric reader who wants to watch this character Piranesi in a very dreamlike, strange world, I can read off the first. It's the title of the first journal entry Piranesi gives. I'll just give this. This could give you the vibe of the book. It says this: when the moon rose in the 3rd northern hall, I went to the 9th vestibule. Entry for the first day of the 5th month in the year the albatross came to the southwestern halls. That gives you the perfect vibe. Like, if that is up your alley, it's super short. It's a thought-provoking read, very character-focused, and I can't recommend it enough. Awesome. Thanks for having us on.
Taste perfection, the ultimate booktubers recommending brilliant pieces. The only thing that really hurt me is their sort of cake and copy that they have, and do you see that? Like, but Piranesi was absolutely a win for me. Austin made a fantastic remark saying it's atmospheric, because from the beginning you were absolutely transported, and because of that it's going to be in position number 3 of the books that I've read. I think it's a great book, and this author, it's actually at the top of my writers nowadays. I'm very obsessed, and it seems I'm not the only one. The first time that I got Andrew's clip, I thought he was going to go for something shorter, because he started to say how, long fantasy series can be. But then he just pulls it and goes for one of the longest, if not the longer, fantasy standalone that I've read.
So a fantasy standalone. Fantasy is really known for its long series, so when you do find a killer standalone, it is really something a wee bit special. So of course, I'm going to pick Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell by Susanna Clarke. Now this book really surprised me. I thought I was going to like it, but I didn't realize how much I would enjoy this book. This is an alternate history with magic in England. Based in 1806, the setting and even the writing style is just really, really immersive. That's the thing that really drew me into this narrative. Anyway, I highly recommend you check out Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. And also the audiobook is fantastic, both the old one and the new one with Richard Armitage, so you can take your pick.
Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, it's an absolute masterpiece. I am obsessed with it. Same as the first time that I read Piranesi. I was mind blown with this one. It's just so phenomenal. The alternate history period and the magic, and it just, everything is so great. I even if it's long, because it is, I missed the characters right after I finished it. That's why out of the books that I read, this is going to go in position number 2. I absolutely loved this one, even more than Piranesi, which is saying a lot. And if you like to be transported into different eras, let's make a jump to the medieval side of fantasy with a recommendation that Johanna has here for us, which is a book that I actually finished 2 days ago.
Hey, Johanna here. While it'd be easy for me to recommend to you a Guy Gavriel Kay standalone, I want to recommend something a little different to you today. I'm going to recommend to you The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. Yes, this is technically part of a series, but it is a standalone. Bujold said so herself, so you could read it as such. And the reason I'm recommending this is because usually in fantasy, we follow a young protagonist and then a mentor figure comes in and out of the story. In this case, we're following the mentor's perspective. We're following a seasoned veteran character named Kazaril. This is a story that involves demonic possession, self-sacrifice. There's a fair amount of beauty and grit to the story, and it's a wonderful introduction to the world of the five gods. So I highly recommend checking it out.
Well, first, Johanna's hair, it's outstanding. But second, I absolutely love how she displayed the interesting change of trope on focus more on the mentor side. And The Curse of Chalion was something that for me was very different. I had it on my nightstand to read it for ages, and I was very, very surprised. I love these. Like every book that I read from this list, it's a top tier recommendation. But that forced me to place Curse of Chalion at position number 8 at the bottom. I loved it. I think it's great. For me, it was 4 stars, very solid read. There were some moments though that did not land, or that the pacing was a little bit not for me, but it might be because of The Hangover from Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. So let's be honest, I might be biased here. But if you want more medieval-esque standalones, let's get to the next recommendation.
Hi, Isa. What a thrill it is for me to be here on Fun Fantasy Books. Thanks so much for asking me about what standalone I would recommend for someone trying to get into fantasy on a great standalone. I'm going to say A Song for Arbonne by Guy Gavriel Kay. I read this not long ago, I think last year, and wow, it was my first Guy Gavriel Kay. It absolutely knocked me out. This is a historical fantasy, and it tells a land where bards are put up on a pedestal. And what's it about? You might ask yourself, like, what's the most important thing to you? For some people, it's family. For some people, it's love. For some people, it's patriotism. For some people, it's the passion of creativity and the art, and how art can define us and make us understand where we come from and who we are a little bit better. This book is about all of those things. It's absolutely amazing, and the construction of the plot, the way it pays off at the end, the beautiful prose, it's just absolutely special. And that's why I'm saying A Song for Arbonne by Guy Gavriel Kay.
I really need to read Guy Gavriel Kay. I am willing to start Lions of Arrasan first, but I am really keen to read this one. Therefore, this is one of those that I have not read. And in my opinion, it will go in position number 6. So I'm solid, this is interesting, but there are so many great recommendations here that were pitched in a way that seems fantastic. And I don't know, perhaps after Curse of Chalion, I'm kind of like already scratched that itch of my medieval-esque era. And let's go way back into past to a book that it's recommended and pitched as being the perfect blend between fantasy, romance, and historical fiction, which when I was hearing this, I was like, okay, I know what you got. And it's such a fantastic story.
Hey, this is Theo, Rekindled Reader, and thank you so much for letting me be part of this collab. I love short standalone fantasy fiction, something that we don't get enough of in my opinion. So I could have gone a number of different ways with this. I tried to be a little bit different and choose something that I think would appeal to fans of fantasy, romance, and historical fiction. Every now and then there's a book that doesn't just tell a story, it makes you feel every moment. And that is my experience with The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This novel is a retelling of the story and myth of the legendary Greek warrior Achilles, told through the eyes of Patroclus, one of his closest companions, who is often overlooked in the mythology. From their childhood friendship to their deep and complex relationship, this book follows them as they grow and train and ultimately face the realities of war. While it's rooted in Greek mythology, Miller breathes new life into these ancient characters, making them feel incredibly human and deeply relatable. What makes the Song of Achilles stand out is its writing, first and foremost. It's emotional, lyrical, immersive in a way that feels completely effortless. The relationship between Achilles and Patroclus is painted with such tenderness, you can't help but get invested. The story is tragic and grand, but at its core, it's about love and fate and the choices that define us. Even if you know the myth, Miller finds a way to make it fresh and heartbreaking. It's a book that lingers with you long after the final page. If you love fantasy, historical fiction, romance, poetic storytelling, mythology, and stories that can break your heart in just the best way, The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller is a huge recommend for me and a must-read.
His edition of The Song of Achilles is so phenomenal, and I think Madeline Miller is such a brilliant author. I remember vividly reading The Song of Achilles and perhaps because my expectations were too high in the sense that I thought everyone is gonna cry. I was like expecting that moment, but it's such a beautiful story that I really hold dear in my heart, and I recommend it to my family and friends. I will place this in position number 7. So it's a tough one, like it's a competition. We will be changing perhaps more into the romance side already with a recommendations from a dear friend of mine, Jess from the channel Honest Fiction.
Hey everyone, it's Jess from Honest Fiction, and today I'm here to share one of my favorite fantasy standalones. Now, I run a romantasy channel, so I like a touch of romance in my fantasy. So I had to pick A Heart of Blood and Ashes by Mila Vane. If you love barbarians, slow burn enemies to lovers, and a heroine who uses her mind instead of a sword, you will absolutely love this book. Madoc, a fierce barbarian warrior, seeks vengeance for his parents' murder, believing the Southern King's daughter, Aven, is to blame. But Aven, a cunning and determined heir to a warrior queen lineage, offers him an alliance through marriage, one that could help them both reclaim their thrones and destroy a greater enemy. As they navigate betrayal, war, and an undeniable attraction, their partnership turns into something far more dangerous, an all-consuming love that neither of them expected. This book is intense, brutal, and beautifully written, and the romance is top tier. So if you're looking for a dark, sweeping love story that is filled with political intrigue, amazing world building, and an alpha possessive hero, you need to read this book.
Jess, I love you, and I think if someone can make me read romantasy, it's really you. You've already proved this one, but just, I'm not sure with this one. Alpha males, not necessarily, but pining, like how you describe it, it sounds certainly fun. But don't kill me. This is gonna go, though, in the position number 8 of the books that I have not read, so in the one that I'm the least excited about. Although it's really like I potentially will, don't kill me. And let's change gears completely, because after hearing this clip, I swear to you, I bought the book. Therefore, this goes in position number 1 of those that I really, really want to read. This booktuber made a fantastic work pitching it and sounds like a great story.
Hey guys, Issa asked me if I could recommend a standalone fantasy book to her readers. And I said, of course I can, but I'm going to stretch the definition of fantasy just a little bit because I want to recommend a fable. And that's going to be The Buried Giant by Kazuo Ishiguro. Like I said, The Buried Giant is a fable, and it takes place in a medieval England, kind of like in Arthurian times. And a magical mist has descended upon the land, and it is making everybody forget. And we follow an aging elderly couple as they want to set out on a journey to go to the next town over because they want to visit their son one last time before they die. And they need to go now before they forget. And they're going to travel out across the countryside and through the mist that makes you forget in search of their son. And they're going to learn a little bit about themselves, life, love, loss, and they might even remember a few things along the way. And Kazuo Ishiguro just has a way with writing. He has a warmth and a tenderness to what he does with the written word on the page, and he has a way of touching your soul as you go through the book in a way that few other authors can replicate. I can't recommend The Buried Giant enough.
Right? It was correct. It sounds outstanding. If you've already read this as well, let me know down below which were your thoughts about it. But it sounds like a very atmospheric, deep, and beautiful story. However, if you like a story that goes more into the magical realism rather than a fable in itself, let's see what Petrik has to recommend, because we all know that he does not miss.
Hi Issa. So thank you so much for inviting me to your channel, and you asked me for a standalone fantasy or sci-fi recommendation. So for this recommendation, I want to recommend Boy's Life by Robert McCammon. Now, I'm not sure whether this counts as fantasy book or not, but I think this belongs in the magical realism genre. But I still think that whether you are a fan of fantasy, sci-fi, or just great stories in general, I think this is the kind of coming-of-age book that you should definitely read. I have never been to Zephyr. I mean, Zephyr is a fictional city, or Alabama. I've never been to Alabama. But this one, I think this is the kind of story that will click with so many people around the world. It certainly did for me, and I know it did for so many people as well. Beautiful writing, beautiful coming-of-age story, and such a wonderful one-off standalone novel.
The idea of this book really shedding light into childhood and allowing us to relive it twice. It seems a concept very endearing for me right now. I'm currently pregnant, so I'm giving it a lot of thought. Childhood, this seems something like it really, really will catch my attention. Therefore, I will put this in position number 4 in the books that I have not read. And because I already shared something important with you, let me now go and share my favorite standalone with you, which is not only a story that made me cry like a baby, but it's a fantastic character work, great action scenes. It has such a profound drama, and it allowed me to think not only in the story but my real life in a bit, and that is The Sword of Kagan by ML Wang. Being fair, I'm not the only one that had the idea of recommending Sword of Kagan. I needed to say everyone that I was going to recommend this so that they do not have that, and some booktubers were like, oh, damn it. So that's also a testament on how great this story is and how many booktubers also adore it. It's a very intimate story that follows a family in this land. They will be fighting an invasion. They have elemental magic and they're pre-alone in this fight, and what you see will surprise you. It's an inner work on the different members of this family that is very traditional, but they break a lot of molds. So please read it and let me know after what you think about these characters. But if you don't want to cry and rather you prefer something that is way more fast and entertaining, let's go to a recommendation from Johan.
So what is my favorite standalone of all time? Well, I'll give you 2 recommendations here because I'm actually not really sure which one is my favorite. Firstly, I will recommend Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. I actually read this book in less than 24 hours. I was absolutely hooked. I found the plot to be incredibly engaging, Blake Crouch's writing style to be really, really accessible, and yeah, I was just absolutely obsessed with this book, and yeah, it's quite short, so check it out. But if you want something that will pull at your heartstring, a beautiful, beautiful coming-of-age story, and also a classic, I'd recommend The Flowers for Algernon by Daniel Keyes. I read this book last year, and it became one of my favorite books of the year. This book is so fantastically beautiful. Basically about a guy with very low IQ that goes through this treatment where he slowly becomes smarter and smarter, and then eventually becomes smarter than everyone else, and it is just so beautifully written, so fascinating, and definitely one of the best books I've ever read.
Dark Matter for me was the beginning of discovering this author. I've loved recursion more, therefore Dark Matter, which I've read, will go in position number 5. Like, it's solid, it was entertaining, it was fast, it made me think. And I think one of the great things about this author is that he takes a thread and he really keeps pushing and thinking about that thread. He acts on the consequences of what is happening. Okay, perhaps we went too far with a sci-fi standalone that is fast and it's really into physics. If you want to go back to fantasy, to classics, let's see what Mike has to recommend us, because I've had wonders about this book, especially how we have this meta writing, which we're able to see this story from the perspective of someone telling the story, which is very interesting.
Hey guys, so Issa hit me up and said, I want to know your favorite standalone fantasy book because they are the unicorn of all things, obviously. So I have to go with S. Morgenstern's classic tale of true love and high adventure. This, of course, is The Princess Bride by William Goldman. This book has a little bit of everything. I think we gotta know the line by now. Fencing, fighting, torture, true love, revenge, it's all in here, and it is an amazing, amazing fantasy story. I feel like by now we've all seen the movie, and it's great, but the good news is, guys, that movie is in this book. So if you really, really enjoy the movie like I do, you'll find plenty of things to love in this book. It really is just great. It is, honestly, a little bit more adult than that Disney movie is. So I think if you haven't actually indulged yet, and you do love that movie, you owe it to yourself, because this is a great, great read. I think I'm going to revisit it soon.
I'm a failure. I have not read The Princess Bride. I want to do it. You know, I've watched the movie so many times. I feel like I already know the story. Although I know things are going to be different, I'm not feeling as surprised. That's why from the books I have not read, I will position these in number 7. Like, it's something that I will eventually read, but it's not burning me at the moment. And if you like those classic fantasy tropes, but you want them in a different spin, let's see what Tori recommends us, because she says that this one has a special twist on a traditional dragon trope.
Hey friends, it's Tori from the channel Tori Talks, and my standalone fantasy recommendation for you is Song of the Beast by Carol Berg. As you can see, it's not very long. What I loved about this book so much is that Carol Berg brings a less common protagonist into her story. He's a tortured bard character who's been set free from this horrific prison life, and instead of seeking revenge, he's on a quest for answers and to understand why his voice and his magic has been taken away. Carol Berg also does a really, really cool twist on dragons and dragon magic, which I really loved. And honestly, this is just a book I don't hear a lot of people talking about, and I binged through it so quickly. It is excellent writing. Carol Berg definitely deserves more attention here on our corner of BookTube, and I hope you will give it a try.
This will go in position number 2 of the books that I have not read, but I really, really want to. It sounds so great, like dark, but sounds enticing. And if you love the idea of a standalone that it's dark, but you rather prefer an author that it's way more popular and, let's say, a king. Let's see what my good friend Ian has to share with us.
Isa, hello. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm not gonna lie, this was a hard choice because trying to pick the best or my favorite standalone fantasy seems like an impossible task, but I think I did okay. My recommendation is not one that would be widely regarded as fantasy, but it is. And that is Stephen King's The Stand. Stephen King's The Stand is actually a dark fantasy novel. The Stand is so amazing because of its deeply developed characters representing a wide spectrum of morality. It's set in a compelling post-apocalyptic world. It explores themes like good versus evil with just an amazing, gripping plot of high stakes. There are several reasons why I love this book. Firstly, its rich character development. King, in his own beautiful way, creates such a large cast of diverse characters with different personalities and motivations. The scope is absolutely epic for this novel. I mean, it explores the aftermath of a devastating pandemic, and in his way, he creates this vast and compelling post-apocalyptic landscape where the survivors must navigate new societal structures. I love that the story comes down to the battle for good and evil, because what else would humans do after the world is destroyed? They try to kill each other. But the story is driven by such a strong narrative arc with so many suspenseful moments, you know, as characters journey across this barren landscape to join either side of this conflict. But above all, King masterfully explores the inner thoughts and motivations of most of these characters, and he allows you as the reader to understand their choices while simultaneously grappling with the complexities of human nature. If you haven't read The Stand by Stephen King, I highly urge you. It is one of the greatest standalone epics you will ever read in the genre. Dark fantasy at its best, post-apocalyptic at its best, Stephen King at his best. And for that reason, The Stand is my choice. Thank you so much again, Isa, for having me on this video. Excited to see what everybody else chose.
The Stand is a book that terrifies me, not only because it is chunky, which I guess I can be alright with it, because I'm not sure if I'm gonna like King enough. I've only read one book from him and it was not his best, so I think it's my duty to read this one and properly discover King. But in the pile of books that I have not read, I believe I will settle these at position number 5. This is something that I need to do, but because I'm procrastinating and I've been doing so for years, I feel comfortable doing so for a little bit longer. Sorry, Ian. If you wanted that idea of a story that makes you reflect in a way about our present, let's go to a fantasy standalone that really it's mesmerizing. Leonie said that she was obsessed with it at the beginning of the year, and it's a story that has a perfect world building and well-crafted magic and characters.
Imagine if spells were cast using typewriters. Imagine if no one at your magical university takes you seriously just because you're a woman. And imagine that everything you thought you knew about the world would be a lie. That is what happens in Blood Over Brighthaven by Emma Wong, the fantasy standalone that I would highly recommend. Oh my god, I was obsessed with this at the beginning of this year. Well thought out characters, intricate world building, everything in this book comes together neatly in one standalone to tell a story about discrimination, closing your eyes to the truth, where power comes from. This book is just a great example of, on the one hand, an absolutely amazing, exciting epic fantasy book, and on the other hand, a story that makes you reflect on real life, our world as well.
Yes, the same author. A Sword of Kagan. Emma Wang wins with Susanna Clark here. The magic system, it's her versus this elemental magic, which is on the softer side. And I honestly think that Blood of a Bright Haven is one of the best standalones that you can read out there. That's why for me, in the ones that I've read, this is position number 4. It's an absolute gem. Thank you everyone for participating in this video. I know you guys have a lot on your plate. I really appreciate these. Like, it has made my month receiving every of your clips. So hopefully if you're watching this and this has been helpful for you, you can let me and the other booktubers know in the comments so that they know that you appreciated that effort. Thank you so much also to my Patreons for the support. All names in the description. If you want to join our book club reading experience, please do so. We are a very cozy and welcoming community and we'd love to chat with you more closely. See you soon.